realistically, there are things that are most sometimes out of your control. Matter of fact, I adapted it from George Jackson's book. I adapted it from George Jackson. George Jackson, he said, and I think it was "Blood in My Eye," and I can't remember the exact quote, but it is something that I took and I adapted it to my life. He said that most problems in your life you could basically trace back to you. There are small little things that that's outside of your control, and somebody else might have did it. But a lot of times, those things themselves are irrelevant. At the end of the day, it's all on you, and that's the mindset that I accept. Anything that's happening in my life that I don't like, it's on me. And by me putting it on me, then I have the power to change it and fix it. I always have. And if anybody try to convince me that it's somebody else's fault, I ain't trying to hear it. Because if I accept mentally that it's on somebody else, then I have to wait for them to decide to take that oppression or whatever it is off of me. And I'm not willing to let nobody else have that type of power. It's on me. It's something that I did or some mistake that I made, and therefore I can make a course correction. I can correct what I've done in order to change where I'm going and what I'm going to get out of life. So at the end of
Ebonic barbaric hieroglyphs, I spit my gifts, shift your surface with vernacular skill. The raw is near, touching down like meteors, none other than black gods. Stones in my timepiece coming from black stars. Negativity far, keep far away from doors. Single-mindedly destroying the ops and the odds. Just another warrior's quest. The past may get rest. Demons coming for my crown, get beheaded like the next. These blessings never threats, just to verbalize a message, catching energies of critics, all the Atari get deaded. Pray I stay alert on the field, be skillmatic, in anything my enemies deal. Be dead actions, I proceed just life I lead. Beneath it so many seas, when it's our time to align stars, so spirits lead. Who could war with me, catastrophically or audibly? Given no choice by God's law, I'm Lucifer on streets.
Black August were first commemorated or first organized in California prison after the death of George Jackson. George Jackson died in August. So those California prisoners, that a lot of them who George Jackson had actually raised the consciousness, and if you look back at that history, that brother, like you just said, he went to prison for a minor theft. I can't remember how much it was, but it was something simple. And as you said, he had 3 years to life. You know, so and I think he did 10 years before he was killed. I think he did 10. And while he was there, he became politically aware and became a revolutionary conscious. And he started teaching and building with other prisoners, black prisoners, Mexican prisoners, white prisoners. He started building with everybody. He started raising the consciousness of the prison and training a lot of the prisoners. That's why he became such a threat in the prison because of what it was that he built. Two major organizations that he's accredited with helping organize was one group called the Soledad Brothers and the group that we know as the Black Guerrilla Family in California prison. And and so when a prison guard died, and they charged him and a couple of his brothers with that crime, saying that he was essentially the only person, or his group was the only people that had not only the political understanding but the combat level of training to have killed the prison guard. And that's why his brother Jonathan Jackson, feeling that okay, they could take him out. Ain't no way in hell my brother ever get out. So he ran into the court building and tried to liberate his brother, and he ended up getting killed himself. And then later, George Jackson tried to escape, or at least they say he tried to escape, and he got killed. And that's what happened. That happened all in August. And so what the brothers did is they looked into our history and they saw, things that they could kind of tie together to August. Nat Turner's rebellion, to Sun Overture's rebellion over in Haiti, all happened in August. The first slaves landed in Virginia, happened in August. They looked at all these different events and then created essentially a revolutionary holiday that's for prisoners. And during the month of Black August, what those prisoners were supposed to do is kind of like how Muslims do during Ramadan, fast during the daylight, no eating, no drinking while the sun is up, training, exercise, no TV watching, no radio list, none of that BS, no BS, just straight focus on revolutionary mental conditioning and physical conditioning in commemoration of the death of George Jackson, but in commemoration of the life of the spirit of revolutionary thought process, revolutionary culture. So that's what Black August is supposed to represent, and that's what it's supposed to commemorate. And it ended up spreading because we even practiced it in Texas prison, so it ended up spreading. Now, walked into prison, you'll watch prison movies and you'll see the brother that in the movie South Central that OG Bobby Johnson hooked up with and started learning with. Or you'll see the brother in the movie X, and I know this is not historically correct, but you'll see the move in the movie X where Malcolm hooked up with the brother in prison and started building and chopping it up with. You'll see these examples of these wise men who was in prison. So I wasn't in the prison. I was looking for them, and then I found that were far and few between because majority of the older men have not developed. Their development was stagnant. They was not operating at the mental level that you would think that they should be at. And that's because just like the stomach, the mind needs to be fed. And if you're sitting in prison 10, 15, 17, 18 years, but you're not feeding the mind, your mind only is operating off the information that you had when you first walked into prison, then you'll be stuck at the level of somebody that's 17 and 18 years old. That's why I wanted the brother Pharaoh on today, because he went to prison at 17. And when I hooked up with that brother and talked to him, because of what I had seen since I had been in prison, I was expecting there to be a lot of stagnation in his development. But he didn't necessarily have that. When I talked with the brother and chopped it up with the brother and spent time, he didn't have that stagnation. And I found out later is because majority of the time that he was in prison, he was studying, he was reading, he was seeking knowledge. And that knowledge, why his body was incarcerated at 17, his brain was still expanding, probably past the expansion that it would have made it to if he would have stayed free, following the trajectory of the life that he was living before he got incarcerated. So he started getting introduced to higher level thinking, which was helping his brain and his mind evolve. So to me, that's my response to that statement about time and space and how it relates to the will, shaping the will of the human being.
And let me add to that real quick, just to give a large perspective on that. And when you talked about him, Brother Pharaoh, in terms of going in and studying and inundating himself with higher consciousness, when you think about space, think about how what he shared his space with. And so when we talk about what we share our space with, that forms the will. It forms our will. It forms our perception. And so from that standpoint, we talk about how these things coincide with discipline. When you talk about your time and space, I want people to always be aware of the fact that we have to be aware of our time and space. So many people live their life without the awareness of where they are in their head and where they are whether we talk about where they are in their head as it applies to physically where they are and the time that they find themselves in within their emotional and logical state and awareness. So when I say time, it has to do with the awareness of that person and how they look at the world. Do they see themselves through the same lens that others see them in terms of their physical, mental, and spiritual time on this planet? So that's important when we talk about shaping the will of the human being, especially when it goes into, you go into warrior discipline. So the second one, which is a question, in regards to a person's failure to identify self-placement, and let me break that down a little bit. When I say a failure to identify self-placement, this is, what do I mean to myself? How do I identify myself in place of where I am and what I involve myself in, as well as when we talk about holding accountability. So as it applies to a person's failure to identify self-placement and hold themselves to a level of accountability, the question is, what examples could we give as to why this is the case or could be the case?
And when you say that, what it makes me think about, I'm gonna tell you what it makes me think about. I read a book by RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan. He wrote a book called The Tao Wu. I love this little book. And in the book, he explains this. He says that essentially when a man starts to recognize that his mind, he breaks it down like this. He says that when you're in the streets one of the main things that you want to do to show people that you making financial progress is to get jewelry. So you go buy you jewels, necklaces, rings, bracelets, things like this. And these things supposed to represent that fact that you having things, you balling, you moving to another level. And he say basically when you go to prison, all that's stripped. You lose the clothes, the cars, the jewelry, all that's gone. So you all uniform. Y'all walking around in the same uniform, moving the same. So nothing. You basically don't have a lot that can show that you're on a higher level than the next person. But then it creates the opportunity to recognize your true jewel. And he said that the true jewel is your mind. That's the true jewel. And once a man recognizes that jewel and learns how to shine and polish that jewel, no matter what kind of clothes you find him in, he'll be in the clothes of a king. No matter what kind of place that you place him in, whether it's in a cell or in the hold, he'll be in a palace, in a kingdom. Once that man has polished that jewel, he can walk in a room and and people will automatically know that it's something different about him once you learn how to polish that true jewel. And that's what that statement makes me think about understanding who you are, what you mean to you, and what you mean to the overall environment around you. And situations like going to prison or any major life event that forces you milestones, I call it, that forces you to just stop and take a look at where you're at, where you want to be, and where you're coming from. Any kind of events like that will force you to take out time to actually ask yourself, who am I? What am I doing? What am I becoming? And am I truly being all that I can be? At least that's the thought process that I went into prison with. When I was sitting in prison, getting that time basically was a fall for me. It was a complete fall, and it forced me metaphorically to my knees, because I didn't really fall to my knee, but it metaphorically it forced me to my knees, and it forced me to really question myself and ask myself a few things about what I was doing with my life and what I wanted to do with my life. And so that's my response to that statement, that question.
All right, I appreciate that. Brother E, I got one for you. When reflecting back on the work you put in to shape a better environment for the next generation, what is the importance of isolation from distraction, parents, from the path towards a culture of self-sufficient awareness?
These big ass questions again.
Yes.
Let Sight get the easy shit. I think, fortunate or unfortunate as it may be, the fact of the matter is the African people, for people, period, but historically, our traditional cultures were aware of and acknowledge the fact that we define ourselves through our interactions with others, and that is self-evident nowadays, that there's this synergistic relationship between the so-called individuals in our community. Someone gives us a nickname and we automatically, that person starts to live up to that nickname, or they fit a particular niche within a group or a community, and we work and shape ourselves to do that. We carry ourselves one way around certain groups and another way around other groups. But our definitions of ourselves come from those around us. And if those around us, if our communities are stuck in a time warp, then we're automatically going to be stuck in a time warp to some degree. Mentally, we're not going to be able to move beyond it, because as African people, we define ourselves by those around us. We acknowledge it, we're aware of it, we used to acknowledge it, we used to be aware of it. This culture and this society does not encourage that. We live in a society where the culture it's weird. African people, traditionally, our cultures are one of reaching out to one another and engaging one another and holding each other accountable and responsible to certain ideals. And that's where we're unified. European culture, they unify through their pursuit of individuality. So the more individual that we can be in this society, is based on their perception of society, of reality, the more we're actually a part of this society, the more we're a part of this community, the more we reject this idea that what happened 400 years ago has anything to do with any of us because we weren't there. I'm an individual. That makes me more part of this society and more part of this community that is based on the idea of people splitting apart. And that's counter to who it is we are. We have to do all kinds of mental gymnastics to try to fit into that, to become a part of it, to some way justify or rationalize our participation and even our acceleration and movement, movement up into that society. I forgot what your question was, but that's what I had wanted to say on the last part.
Well, basically, and let me add to a little bit, the key element here is the importance of isolation from distractions or deterrents in order to put a person on a path toward a culture of self-sufficient awareness. And why I say self-sufficient awareness is because, again, going back to when we talk about how you shape a person's will based upon their perception of time and space. When we as revolutionaries and we in which we're working toward raising the consciousness of the people around us, raising the conscience of the people we want to impact so that they can work toward collective empowerment. The deal is having a culture of self-sufficient awareness goes into where that person can see themselves. Where do they place value within themselves, and where do they place accountability within the path that they know they need to shape in order to create a better future, whether it be for themselves or whether it be for the collective. But kind of homing in on what you said, within certain sectors of society, they focus on individualism. And since they focus on individualism, the deal is when we talk about a culture of self-sufficient awareness, we're talking about how the collective is able to operate when you're dealing with a people that have been broken down and stripped of their value system, stripped of their way of life. Whereas Europeans don't have that problem, us as Africans do. So when we put the individual before a collective awareness of self, then what you find is a shell of a human being attempting to be an individual. But if they don't have any collective consciousness as a people or as a culture, then what can that individual contribute to? What cause will that individual contribute to? It damn sure won't be an African-centered cause. It's going to be something along the terms of imperialism, because that's where they get their makeup and that's where they get their identity from. And with that being the case, and with that environment basically inundating them with negative images of self, then that goes into when we talked about shaping the will of that person in terms of them recognizing the discipline and the importance of our movement, the importance of changing the dynamic of dealing with things that applies to being a victim in terms of codependency. So that's kind of why I wanted to emphasize that.
Well, see, even with that that last phrase, codependency, if a woman's in a relationship and the man's beating her ass and everybody in the community and the family can say, hey, he's beating your ass, that's no good. As long as she continues to empower him and enable him, it's going to keep on happening until she makes a choice, makes a decision to change the culture, to change her culture, change her cultural mindset, and you say, yo, I don't deserve this. Yo, this isn't love. Until she makes that decision to change what is being fed into her mind. What is it Chuck D said? You can't change the people around you. You change the people around you. Only the so-called individual can do that. We can't do anything about that. That's why that idea of it's the revolutionary's job to uplift the consciousness of the people. Yes or no. Ultimately, it's the people's job to raise the consciousness of the people. For me, it's the revolutionary's job, simply because I can't to act as an example. And in doing that and being that example, I'm raising the consciousness of the people, not the individual people, but the people as a mass, because now my consciousness is higher. I am the people, therefore the consciousness of the people has grown higher. But it still comes down to that person that's in that a relationship that's getting her ass kicked or his ass kicked, because dudes get abused emotionally way more than we would like to talk about. But until that person makes that conscious effort, that choice to cut some things off, to discipline themselves, and ultimately we take, especially in this society, we discipline ourselves along the lines of those things that we like to do any fucking way. You know, we'll cut out certain things by and large that, or take on certain things that bring us joy, that excite us, that raise our adrenaline level. But we'll cut out things that we kind of didn't want to do anyway. The biggest, I think, back in the day, and I'm gonna say it, War. I don't care what you think. I don't care how you feel. Back in the day, submissive information, I hated to read, but I read a lot more than I would have had I not been a part of it, because I chose to discipline myself in certain terms to do the job that I had to do. I made that decision because of what was laid in front of me, because of my character, because of who it is I am, because I didn't want to fall behind, because I wanted to make sure the people that I had respect for respected me in the role that I was taking on. So I allowed others to hold me accountable because I held myself accountable. But if we choose not to place ourselves in a position where we cut off certain things, and let's face it, 99.9% of the shit that we do is a distraction any fucking way. I think back in the day, I called it, what was it? Entertainment, the biggest, the greatest industry in the world by a long shot globally is entertainment. It's distraction. And I'm not saying don't watch a football game. I'm not saying don't listen to certain music or whatever. I'm saying it's like Chuck D or KRS-One talked about. It ain't no problem with the what is it, mumble rap and the booty music and all of that. The problem is, where's the balance? Where's the KRS-Ones and the Most Defs on the other side to make sure that just as you're not going to sit up and eat a bunch of Starburst all day or Skittles and have that be your meal, you got to have some type of nourishment, something that builds you up mentally to offset that. Everybody likes to kick it and have fun and party from time to time, but at some point in time, there's got to be this where you cut that shit off and leave that over there. You know, that's just I don't want to say common sense, but that's something that I think everybody would agree with in the right context. You know, most people ain't going to agree with it in this context because it's painful, because it hurts, because we do distraction. We involve ourselves in distraction for exactly that reason, because we don't want to hurt. So the more we talk to people about isolating and get away from it, the more pain we're causing these people, and the more they're going to run to whatever it is that they're doing to distract themselves from the pain. So it's kind of a catch-22. And that's one of the things that I've said over the years, is that every generation has gotten smaller and smaller in terms of the number of people that are willing to take that shit on. You know, as they whittle down the community, there are fewer and fewer of us willing to stick our head up above the sand, because, there's so much sacrifice. There's so much we have to give up. You know, looking through it through the lens of that individual, as opposed to looking through it through the collective. You can understand that the more you buy cheap shit from Walmart that comes from China, the more you're empowering companies like Walmart and whatnot, because they pay people in China so little, they're not going to bring the jobs back here so that you can have a job. You know, you want $15 an hour, they working for $15 a week. Where do you think the jobs are going to go? So our smallest steps, and we used to say it all the time, think globally, act locally. And those are the small things that we have to be willing to do, is make this huge sacrifice of not, and I'm still going to harp on this example, because if sisters watch it, hopefully it pisses them off. I like to literally step on their toes, but the more we invest in these red bottom shoes and Nikes and whatever else it is that we distract ourselves with, the traveling. Oh God, I'm sick of people saying, I want to go travel. Travel for what? You know, you have to be willing and able to put roots down. Don't no tree grow traveling the world. Trees don't grow until they dig their roots down into the ground. And we have to be willing to sit still. One of the things that white folks, that our elders had a problem with white folks way back in the day, is when white folks would come to learn, to places like Kemet and Ethiopia and all of these places, our ancestors, the elders would their complaint about these people is they won't sit still. In order to plot the path of a star that only passes through every 3,000 years, you got to be willing to sit still and observe what's going on around you. But we're constantly wanting to go, constantly wanting to do, constantly wanting to move around, because when we sit still, it's like driving in a car with no music on. Your mind starts to do things. It's like sitting in a room with no TV, no music, no nothing. Your mind starts to do things. So we turn on the music to distract us. We turn on the TV to distract us. We talk to our homies to distract us. We jack. You know, and that's one of the reasons, even in y'all holy book, in the Bible, these cats would go away. Moses and them would go away from the masses of the people for whatever time and have a conversation, call it God, call it self, call it whatever you want to call it. They would have a time where they would stop and they would listen to that voice that's inside. We don't do that anymore. You know, every prophet did it. Every holy book talks about it. Is that time for isolation, that time to get rid of distractions so that you can hear what's being said. In fact, if we're deep in the church and you say anything about hearing a voice in your head, your ass is going to get in trouble. You know, it's amazing to me how hard or how violently we will reject what's ours. You know, this idea of a voice in your head. It's not crazy. It's supposed to be there. It's supposed to talk to you. It's supposed to give you guidance. What you're supposed to do is sit down, shut the fuck up, and listen to it. You ain't got to do what it tells you. You don't be a jackass. If it tells you to run out into the expressway during rush hour, butt ass naked, be like, nah, I'm not gonna do that. But if it tells you, okay, you can skip buying them red bottom shoes this month and put that money towards something that's going to help the community, since you're always talking about helping the community, y'all like to say, you can't have it both ways. You can support Black business or you can integrate. You can't have an empowered Black community and integrate. You can't be a part of the program that's going on in America and have a Black Wall Street. You're going to have one or the other. That's just the way it is. Because I'm sorry, as much as it makes us feel good to go and we'll clean up at Walmart, getting our main stuff. And as we head home, we pass by this Black store, we'll stop in, spend 20 or 30 bucks, leave and think we done supported Black business because you bought a fucking t-shirt. That's not supporting Black business. That's cutting out all that shit that you get at Walmart that you can get at a Black store, or cutting back a whole bunch of that stuff because most of it's frivolous and you don't need it anyway. But that's that idea of you giving 90% of your wealth to them and then bringing 10% back home to the community, and then thinking you did something while you got your I voted thing on your shirt and got vaccinated and all the rest of this nonsense. So you're either going to buy into one or you're going to buy into the other. There's very little gray area. And I know it's a process, blah, 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 blah. Been hearing about people at their own rate and all of that for the past 20, 30 years, whatever. Time out for that. If you're not willing to make that conscious decision to choose B over A, Black over these assholes, if you're not willing to do that shit, you need to shut up. Just stop fronting, stop pretending, because this is what the movement is. This is what the struggle is. Stop investing in them some bitches. Isolate yourself from their shit and let that voice talk to you. Open up a book, sit down, and put something else in besides some fucking Skittles y'all been sucking on for the last 30 goddamn years. My bad.
Well, I appreciate that, because basically what you're talking about really goes back into what we opened with, which is overcoming victim codependency. So we're talking about a specific type of dependency, and that's a victim codependency. And then what you're getting into now goes into that third definition we talked about, which was mind cleansing. So the people have to be able to redefine their appetite so that they will embrace a higher quantitative lifestyle content, which is what we're talking about. But again, it goes back to that appetite, because it's that appetite that causes them to do any and everything but what they need to do in order to deal with our collective consciences and identity, and deal with self-sufficiency as African people. Question number 4, Syke, for you here. Looking back on the position of time, why is that considered our most valuable asset?
Well, I'm gonna add a little bit into what he said first, and then I'm gonna go into that because he was correct about the ability to sit still and kind of listen to self. When I was incarcerated, and I used to take a lot of time to just separate myself from people. I separate. I choose days where I'd go into cell. Sometimes it'd be a birthday, or maybe it might be New Year's Eve. I choose just point where I would separate, do a fast, and just study and meditate out. No eating, no kicking it in the day room. I'd put a curtain up on my door so nobody could come in and see me and disturb me. And I just spend that whole time doing that. And ironically, what made me think about it, when he said, not likening myself to any of the prophets or nothing like that, but when he talked about even in the holy book, how people like Moses had to go off and separate themselves, and Jesus, I started noticing, and that's why I started doing it, because I noticed that every great historical persona that ever brought a teaching or a guideline to the people done it after they separated themselves from the mass. They separated themselves first, came into oneness with self, and then they came back to the world with a blueprint of how to get to that level of oneness. Jesus did it with the gospel. Moses did it with the Torah. Muhammad did it with the Quran. Buddha did it with his teachings. You'll look throughout history, and you'll constantly and consistently see this. And that's one of the things that I think is very and essentially important to understand when you read. You don't just read words and to be able to recite information that you learned by reading those words. But when you read, you also read to look for formula, because the people in those books or that wrote those words are telling you formula. When I first got incarcerated, I wanted to know how to do that time productive. So what did I do? I went to studying people that did time productive. I looked into the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I followed what Malcolm X prescribed, and he wasn't necessarily telling you, hey, you need to do this. He was telling you, this is what I did while I was incarcerated. And this is how he went from Detroit Red to Malcolm X. So I started following that procedure. The books that he described in the autobiography of Malcolm X, I went and got those books, at least as many of them as I could, and I read those books the way that he said he read those books. Same thing with Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom, or Mumia Abu Jamal's Live from Death Row. I read these books and I wanted to understand how these brothers did their time productive. And so I started imitating those things to a certain. Matter of fact, many of the things that I wrote books of my own while I was incarcerated. Many of the things that I wrote, manhood training courses and things like that, those things came to me when I was separated and by myself, doing those fasting, listening to that voice that he was talking about. I heard and had to grab a pen and paper and just start writing, because I heard and it sounds so clear. Not on no spooky stuff or no weird stuff. It was just information that was already there that I wasn't listening to, because I had so many distractions distracting me from that information. I started writing it, and to be like DJ Khaled, another one. Next thing I know, I'm dropping hits after hits, and I ain't talking about songs, but I'm talking about information. I'm dropping hits, and I'm looking at it, and I'm amazed at what just came out of my head just from listening, just from paying attention to myself and getting away from those distractions. So I think that is extremely important. Now, you asked about time, and I said that when I first got incarcerated, it was a fall for me, And when I first got incarcerated, I was angry, I was upset, and I wasn't upset at anybody else per se. When at first when something happened, one of the things that we as human beings do is we hate to take blame, to look at ourselves and actually take responsibility and be accountable for what we've done to ourselves. So the first thing we do is start pointing fingers at everybody else. It's everybody else's fault. Hell, it was Brother Eve's fault I was in prison, in my mind. And Brother E didn't do it, but that's what we do. We point at everybody. It's Wall's fault he couldn't get me out. It's everybody's fault. It was the Panther's fault that I got out at time, though, because they brought up the fact that I was a member of the Black Panther Party while I was going to trial, and the DA was determined to hide me. So that's true. That really took place. But back to the point. So first, you're gonna blame everybody. And then when I had to really just deal with reality of the fact is, it was stupid mistakes, decisions, and thought patterns that I had that led me into that situation. But back to the point, I was upset at first. One of the things I used to do is I used to try to force my desire not to waste time on other people. I would literally unplug the TV on dude. And a lot of places that'll cause you to get beat up in prison. And I'd go to giving a sermon about y'all acting like y'all on vacation. The word vacation literally means the act of vacate, the act of leaving empty. It means that you've been so successful in your pursuit that you can vacate your life for a week, for 2 weeks, and then you can come back to your life without missing a step. But we are not on vacation because we have not been successful. The fact that we are in here in prison being completely controlled by other human beings means that we wasn't successful. Not only do it mean that we wasn't successful, it means that we are failure. And now it's time, since we're not dead, to analyze what we failed at and start making changes about how we're gonna do things. You know, that's the position that I took. And at first I was directing that toward other people. Then I finally had to start directing that in myself, me. And so I started working on trying to utilize that time properly. And one of the things that I came into the awareness of when I started studying mathematics, because I kind of fell in love with math to a certain, is the concept of the exponent. I fell in love with that idea. And I looked at mathematics like, you know, you take a 5 and you put a 2 up to the corner of the right. That's an exponent. And essentially in math, that means 5 squared. It means 5 times itself. So while we looking at it and we see 5, in reality, we're looking at 25. Then you take a regular 5 and just put that 5 right there without the exponent, and that means 5. Why they both look alike except for the little 2. They both kind of look alike, but they not alike. The one with the exponent has more value than the one without the exponent. And in my mind, why I couldn't move and leave any kind of footprint on the planet because I was incarcerated, I could give myself an exponent, which would make me more valuable than the average person who didn't get himself an exponent in prison. And to me, the exponent was knowledge, because the exponent means to move to the next power. So to me, knowledge is what moved the person, you know, to that next stage or that next level of power. So I dedicated myself to utilizing that time to give myself those exponents, so to speak. And I know I'm getting long-winded. I'm gonna say this and then I'm gonna pass the mic. You know, and I was building on. I haven't done it yet. It's ironic. I was building on doing a video about the value of time on my channel. And one of the perspectives that I was going to come at was that time is your most valuable commodity. It's your most valuable commodity. Men use time to build empire. Men use time to build dynasty. Some of the wealthiest people on the planet used the time that they had to build their wealth. And it's the reason why when you commit a quote unquote crime in this society, they take time from you. They give you time. You go to court and they sentence you to a time. You see how they sentenced we talked about George Jackson at the beginning, to 3 to life, meaning that the minimum that he could do was 3 years. The maximum he could do was life. Because if I take your time from you, you cannot be effective if I take your time. And if you take your time from yourself, I always say this, the greatest crime that you can commit against yourself is to waste your time. The second greatest is let somebody else. And that's what they do to you in prison. They put you in a position where you can waste a lot of time. The majority of people in prison spend their time masturbating, watching stories. The grown men are watching soap operas, watching stories, playing dominoes, watching sports. There is an entire TV in prison. There are 2 TVs because if you're on a regular build cell block, there are 2 TVs. So many people, it might be 100 people. So there are 2 TVs, one on one end of the cell block, one on the other. One of those TVs is called a sports TV. It's dedicated to playing sports all day long. Don't even change it off of sports. You're not allowed to take it off a sporting event. Keep it on sports all day. And it reminded me when I saw the movie The Gladiator with Russell Crowe. It reminded me of when Commodus started the game back in the Coliseum, and here it is, people starving and hungry and things like this. But you just get them the gladiator fights to look at, and they'll forget all about it. You know what I'm saying? They'll forget all about it. So to me, time is most definitely your greatest commodity. It makes everything else. It actually produces the value for everything. Life is useless without time. I know people might even hear me say that and be like, "Well, time can't be the most valuable. Your life is your most valuable. Your life is useless if you don't have time. Your life is completely useless. Your children, your money. It takes time to produce any of that. It takes time to rear your children, to educate them, to build with them. If you don't have no time at all, but you have children, you basically don't have any children because time is that value. And that's what, and and let me say this, and I'm gonna share them. I know I said this a while ago. Uh, some people say time don't exist. There are some that say, me, my favorite words in the English lexicon is practical and pragmatic. So we could all get theoretic concepts about time all day long. If I cannot use that in my real life, in real time right now, to me, it's absolutely useless. To me, it's absolutely useless. If I cannot use it to create greater levels of productivity in my life, then it's a conversation not worth having, in my opinion. But there's a guy, Paulo Rebelli. He wrote a book called The Order of Time, where and if you're interested in going to get a whole bunch of stuff that you can all go read the book, and he'll show you why time don't exist theoretically. He'll show you why it ain't real. Now, to me though, we define time, and I'm gonna give you what Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of time. 1A is the measured or measurable period during which an action, process, or condition exists or continues. If we can measure, if we can measure an action or the period in which an action or process or condition exists, that is what's called time. One of the most basic times that we deal with is a day. And a day is defined by the time that it takes the Earth to rotate on its own axis, which is actually taking place, which is actually happening. And it happens every 23 hours, 56 minutes, 4.9 seconds. It's happening. So we can define that time off of that, or even a year. A year is the time that it takes the Earth to make a full revolution around the sun, which is 365 days, 5 hours, 46 minutes, 4.9 seconds. It's this time, this thing is actually taking place. If Brother E is 65 years old, that means Brother E has took that trip around the sun 65 times. I think you 65, ain't you, Brother E? That means he took that trip, I'm being funny, 65 times. He made a full rotation around the sun 65 times. That's what that means. So regardless if people believe time don't exist or not, these rotations, these movements are actually taking place. And these movements and these rotations are having an effect on the time that it takes for us to be productive in our life, to be successful in our life, or to be complete failures in our life. And I think that's why people need to take time so seriously. People that are sitting behind bars, and as I said earlier, most of them don't value time. Many of them have given up. I've seen a lot of brothers that have completely just given up on life. They don't see the end of the road. They don't see this thing end. When you give an 18-year-old brother a 30-year sentence, a lot of times, and not all the time, because as I talked about Pharaoh was 17 when he got a 30-year sentence. And instead of folding, the brother built himself. But I seen brothers down there, 18 years old with a 30-year sentence, and and I'm talking to the brother. I'm trying to get a brother things to read. I'm taking the brother out for workouts and things like this and training. And it's hard to keep him from falling into his depression. It's hard to keep him from that. The brother was an artist. I'm not gonna say the brother's name, but the brother was a great artist. And I'm trying to tell him, even when I get out, I can assist you in things of posting your art, your things. But the brother couldn't see that vision. He just couldn't see it. And his mind is like, man, that's more time than I've been alive. I ain't been on the earth 30 years. And these people telling me at 18 years old, I got to do 30 years. He just couldn't see it. And he fell into a state of depression. And then he started creating a world that didn't exist for himself. You know, being so young, the brother hadn't had that many romantic experiences, hadn't had a child, hadn't really been in love. So he fell in love with a homosexual down. He fell in love with a man that was walking around pretending to be a woman. So he fell in love with that and tried to create a relationship and tried to produce some level of normalcy out of the confusion that prison placed in front of him. You know what I'm saying? And that's why, and to me, it's extremely valuable. I mean, extremely important to value your time and not to waste your time. And I know I said I was gonna be quiet, but I got one more thing to say that because he pointed at something that I like. He talked about the system and all of it. It's this social media nonsense they got going on. That's why they all run around talking about I love to travel. I want to travel. I love to travel. Because other people are posting videos and pictures all on social media traveling. They want to do it too. It's funny that during the COVID thing, when they gave that free money, quote unquote free money, because if you ever study economics, you know the first principle of economics is there is no such thing as a free lunch. It does not exist. And if you don't believe that, you was balling out of control when they were giving you $1,400 free money. Now you're in a recession. There is no such thing as a free lunch. It does not exist, never has existed, and will not exist. But when they were getting that quote unquote free money away, everybody was taking trips to Florida. Everybody was in Miami. You look all over social media and they all was balling. And they was balling not because they earned the right to ball or to vacate, but because the government gave them some free money. Government gave them free money and then they went on trips. And that's what's going on in the social media age. Everybody's trying to keep up with everybody else. Drake has a song, I can't remember the lyrics verbatim, but essentially what he's saying in the song, he said that he knew a chick named Paris who always wanted to visit Paris. But when she got to Paris, all she did was take pictures to send back to the people back home of her being in Paris. So all she wanted to do was to show people, look, I'm in Paris. Look at me. And you know that thought process, and it's more prevalent in women than in men. And that's not a sexist statement. It's just a real one. It's more the bad. When they rap about the bad, they want the bad. When they rap about the red bottom, they want the red bottom too. And they want to floss it and flash it all over social media so people can feel like they balling and they having things just like they are. And that's where I think a lot of these mistakes and these problems are coming from. Yes, I agree 100%. Either people need to sit down sometime and listen to that voice that's going on in their mind. And I'm a very boring man to date. Women have found that out. I'm an extremely boring man to date because I'm a weirdo that likes to go work out and read books. That's what I like to do. I don't care anything about going out to eat and having any of these other unnecessary experiences. And I guess it's because we did all of it as teenagers. I be wondering how 50-year-old women are still amazed about going out. I don't understand. But we were doing that as teenagers. In the early 20s, we went out and went to the strip clubs every weekend and all this stuff. I don't understand how people are still amazed at 40 years old by this same stuff. But anyway, I talked majority of the things, so I'm gonna pass it on. I pulled me a brother E that time, so I'm gonna pass the mic.
I'm gonna forego any more existential commentary on time for the sake of the conversation, but say that time is very much contextual or dependent on purpose. You know, if you have no purpose, of course, time is not going to matter. Or if you believe that you have no purpose, time is not going to matter. When you have goals or something that you're supposed to be getting done, then time becomes an issue. Time becomes something that you need to manage and focus and make use of. Most cats early on in life lose that purpose, have no purpose to be here except to just be here. It's like when Agent Smith in the Matrix was telling Neo, you know, when you jumped into me, we came together, something happened. You took my purpose from me. You undefined my life. And so from that point, what was Smith doing? Smith was just making more and more of himself, more and more Smiths, just going around reproducing, replicating himself over and over again, which is essentially what we do in the community, you know, both literally, physically, just having babies everywhere because fucking has no purpose anymore except, you know, it feels good and that's it. Our participation in the community doesn't have a real purpose anymore except for what we do. You know, I build this house for somebody because I build this house, nothing greater. I go to work because I go to work, pay bills, nothing greater. So in this society, that's again encouraged through the concept of the individual. There is no greater purpose than me, myself. So of course I'm gonna do whatever it is I want to do. And so time is not of the essence. Time is just to be squandered like anything else, and played with and had fun with. Whereas in more traditional communities, there was a greater purpose. The greater purpose was the community, and so time became more of a precious thing. Time became more of something. You don't build pyramids without some type of concept of time. You don't build tekhens and the temples that still stand today without some respect for the ongoing movement of time and what it's going to mean down the timeline. So again, with us having no purpose, with us not being able to identify with anything greater than ourselves, than our own carnal wants and needs, then we lose respect for time and when space, which is the other side of the time coin. Can't have one without the other. My bad, I'm starting to go too far into. But we don't have any respect for time, and so us getting distracted, that's a good way to spend our time, because why not? It's all about my ego and what it is I want to do with my time, I the individual. So why shouldn't I do this? So there's no investment or no consideration for something as big as time, which very few people, if anybody, can actually define what time is. So it kind of makes sense that people don't have a concept of what to do with time. So yeah, there you go. Quit playing, War. It's your turn.
Well, I'm digging the fact that finally y'all getting around to the whole point of the thing of perception of time and space.
Again, you don't drop people off in the middle of space and say, bring it home. If you want to know something, you ask a question. Trying to be Mr. Philosophical fucking Yoda ass, that don't work.
It did work. All right, let me ask another question here. Okay, and Psych, you kind of got into it, but just go into it a little bit deeper as to what you consider as foundational to the building of self-sacrifice, and then you add to that.
I started learning because I used to talk about in prison. I used to talk to the brothers about sacrifice a lot. Then I started to understand about how we think and how this culture has taught us to look at certain things. So I had to stop using the word sacrifice, and I started using the term investment. That's what I started using. I'm talking about the same exact thing, but if I tell the brother to sacrifice the football game today for his studying, that sounds like he's losing something. I tell the brother today, instead of watching the football game, invest into basically becoming more intelligent and utilize that time toward study. Brothers used to come to me. We had one of the most dynamic workout teams in prison. We called it the God Squad. And we said that anybody that joined the God Squad was going to elevate to the level of God. That's what we used to tell them. And one of my sayings in that by joining the God Squad is that we have a what's the phrase? We have a 90-some% dropout rate. Oh, we trying to kill you. I'm literally trying to kill you. I'm trying to leave everything of you that's weak on the concrete. But if you stay, we have a 100% success rate. Everybody that stays comes out being the best version of themselves. And we talked about when brothers will come and say they want to participate in the squad, I'd ask them, what are you willing to let go of? What do you mean, what am I willing to let go of? You say you want to train with us. We train out like 3 to 4 hours a day. All right, I'm ready. I want it. So what are you willing to sacrifice? Why I gotta sacrifice something? I'm gonna make it clear. It's only 24 hours in a day. Right now, currently, you're not working out, right? Yeah. So that means that you are filling those 24 hours a day with something. Right. I need 4 hours out of your day. That means that you have to kill something else that you are already doing in order to carve out that 4 hours for me so that you can get this training. So what are you willing to sacrifice? And a lot of times people don't realize that. You can't just add new stuff to your life without getting rid of something else. You got to look at the things that prohibit your ability to move to where you say you want to go and be willing to get rid of those things. He talked about not liking to read. When I started reading, I found a love for reading, but it's certain things that I love reading. Well, I was incarcerated. I had to force myself to read things that I thought was boring, like finances, economics. And recently, I hated those things. Those things were boring as hell to me. But I knew that I didn't want to come home and be broke. I knew I wanted to be able to come home and manage my finances right. And I knew that I never wanted to go to prison again. So I was not willing to commit a economic crime in order to have money. So I needed to understand the flow of money a little bit better. So I had to force myself to sit down and study those things. And the same things with a lot of the things that I had to eliminate or that I felt the need to eliminate while I was incarcerated, like smoking and drinking, because you can still smoke and drink in prison. Not It's not legal in prison, but it's there. Like smoking and drinking in order to make sure that my wind was right. In order to, cause we would run 4 hours. We would run 4 miles every other day. We would run 4 miles. It was, and those 4 miles was ran before we did weight training. So you can't run 4 miles every other day and then go do a 2 hour weight training and smoke every day. You just can't. It ain't happening. And that's another thing I used to tell the brothers. We'd get out there, and every new member of the workout, every new person that come and join us would throw up. They would vomit, and I would tell them that's your body testifying against you. You know, you're smoking, you're eating swine, you're drinking hooch, you're sleeping all day, you're spending most of your time just masturbating. Your body is gonna testify against you. It's gonna tell on you when we get out here on this concrete. When we get out here in this sun and go to doing these burpees and these push-ups and these squats, when we go to doing this, especially on the last day of the week when we do Iron Man training, that's what I call it, the full body workout. When we do the Iron Man training, your body is gonna testify against you if you have not been taking care of your body properly. And you know, that's where self-sacrifice comes in to me. That's where self-sacrifice comes in. And let me say this, and then I'm gonna be quiet. I remember one time it was a brother Rick. He used to complain because he was already working out before he connected with us. He was already working out. But like most brothers, he was working out on his chest. He was making sure his chest and his arms were right. So when he came and started working out with us, you know, you had everything came with it. The legs, making sure your wind was right by doing burpees and jump rope. And he used to be like, man, why we gotta do all this? You had like we training to be a Navy SEAL or something. Why we gotta do all this? Why we doing all this? And like I say, I stopped using the word sacrifice and started using investment. So the first time he had a confrontation, a physical confrontation, a fight, first time he had one, he ran over the dude. It was like a truck running over a squirrel. He ran over the dude with ease. And when he ran over the dude, he was literally shocked. He turned to me and he looked at me, and he was, so you know, you fight, you get excited, adrenaline pumping. He looked at me and he said, "It works. It works." He said, "I just mopped him up, and I ain't even." He said, "I don't even feel like I've been fighting because the training we do is way more difficult than anything that anybody's gonna throw at us that stands in front of us." And that was my whole ideal of why I trained the way I did. It wasn't just push-ups and bench press. It wasn't just that. It was a full-fledged training, like we was actually training to go somewhere. And in my mind, we were training to go from this lower state to a higher state. To me, there has to be a balance between thought process, between physical body. I'm gonna say this. I was just watching. I'm gonna admit this, a guilty pleasure of mine. I just binge watched the damn Game of Thrones. I just binge watched this stuff. Liked it. Actually liked it. I don't know
I
how.
still ain't watched it.
Man, I like that damn show. And I'm gonna tell you why I liked it, because I like symbolism. And there is a part in the show where this dude, you know, he's essentially royalty, and he gets knocked out of wonder. And so he's paralyzed, but he's intelligent. He's extremely intelligent. Well, I ain't gonna tell you. Oh, well, y'all probably never watched the show. Ironically, he ended up becoming the king of the seven kings at the end of the damn show. At the end of it, but this little kid, he's intelligent, and so he runs into a giant who's big and strong, but he's basically dumb. And so this giant carries him everywhere, and he calls shots. You know what I'm saying? He calls shots, and it made me think, you know, because some people are all body and no mind, and then some people are all mind and no body. But to me, the gorilla is the perfect man, as Huey P. Newton said, because the gorilla is both mind and body. He's the political theoretician and he's the military fighter. You know, he's both. He's the thinker and he's the physical insert. He's both things, and that's what I was going for. I was going for trying to manifest that ideal of the gorilla being the perfect man. We got 4 hours of study a day, and we got 4 hours of training, of physical training a day. We got 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. This what is to me would produce the perfect man, as Huey called it, the gorilla. And that was my thinking when it came to self-sacrifice and the discipline. And let me say this: discipline literally means uh, the domesticated training of an animal. That's what the word discipline literally means. So to discipline something means to train a condition. To me, the thing that we were disciplining was our physical body. That's the animal. You know, the mind is God. The mind, that consciousness is God. It's supreme consciousness. But if you don't domesticate the animal that the supreme consciousness travels in, then you might drag God down to the level of the animal itself. So you discipline the animal. It's a scripture that I love, and I always use this scripture it represents the knowledge of birthing God, and it's 1 Corinthians chapter 9 verse 27. Birthing the wisdom of God. That's what I call it. 9 represents birth, born. 2 represent wisdom. 7 represent the number of God. So birthing the wisdom of God. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 9 verse 27, it says, "I beat my body daily, and I make it my slave, so that as I have preached to others, I myself will not fall short of the goal." And I used to always tell brother, I said, analyze it. He said, "I beat my body daily." Think about it. He said, "I," as if the "I" is something separate from the me, from my body. And what he's saying is the mind is that declaration. It's saying, "I beat my body." My body represents something that's property of mine. It's something that I have ownership over. I beat it daily, and I make it my slave, meaning that I discipline it, train it. I put it through hell. So that it will be in complete submission to my will, to my desire. It will not go astray from me. I make it my slave, so that as I talk all this revolutionary talk and discipline talk to everybody else, I myself won't be a hypocrite. I myself won't fall short of stuff. And to me, that's what self-sacrifice and discipline was about.
Go ahead, Eve. You got something to add to that? All right. Well, let me go to the next one here, which kind of feeds into what you were just talking about. But I want to start off with you, E, still on this one here. What is personal ownership, and how is it easily misplaced for material ownership? And then one thing real quick, when I talk about personal ownership, in the context in which we're talking about it, it basically goes into the acquirement of internal wealth versus external possessions. Go ahead, E.
Well, I still say it's because we've accepted the Eurocentric concept of life and death. And we bought into the idea that, well, you only live once, YOLO, gotta make the most of it. Again, back to satisfying what it is I have and need, me personally, right here in this point in time, and pursuing nothing greater than myself. What was the key question again?
Basically talking about personal ownership and how it's easily misplaced for material ownership. And Sight kind of broke down what he referred to himself as being boring simply because he puts his time and his energy into constantly studying, and then he talked about the balance of physical and his mental state. But when
I mean that idea that the only things that are real and worthwhile and worth putting our fingers on are things that we can put our fingers on, and things that appeal to the five senses. We can't appeal to a sense of community. We can't touch it, taste it, feel it, smell it, none of that. That's something greater than this physical that we've all been focused on. And when I say we've accepted their perception of life and death, what's real in all of those things, that's what in part what it is I'm talking about. We believe that life is what it is we can put our hands on, what we can touch, what we can feel. And so those are the things that the individual pursues, whereas the communal pursues those things that are bigger than that, things that can't be, things that have their representation physically or manifested physically in particular ways. You know, this idea, when we look at sisters and brothers on the continent in some places, and, you know, they always like to show pictures of us in the jungle and blah, and, you know, all of those, you know, tribal and all that sort of thing, which is not to say they don't exist, but, you know, Kenya and Ethiopia and all of these cities, we have the big cities, the skyscrapers and the nightclubs and the yada, 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 yada. But when we look and we say that those sisters and brothers who are not in the big cities or not in the metropolis areas, those who are riding dirt bikes on dirt roads and folks are dressed in traditional gear and blah, blah. We look at them a lot of times and automatically we think about them being poor, you know, because they don't have the red bottom shoes, because they're not in the metropolis, because they don't have, you know, PlayStations and all of these physical things. But when we step back and look at it, they're only poor in relationship to what it is we place value in. You know, we place value in these material possessions and ownership and possession, being possessed and possessing things. You know, it's a double-edged sword. It's the same thing. If you possess something, at some point that thing will start to possess you, and that's where we're at. You know, when we're not focused on a symbiotic relationship, we're focused on the codependency, and the codependency in this world is capitalism. You know, capitalism, one of the primary characteristics of capitalism is that it always has to have a culture of want. If people in this world only bought what they needed, capitalism would collapse. But because people constantly want a new car, people constantly want more food, people constantly want more new shoes and all of these other things, that's what drives it. That's what keeps the shareholders happy. That's what keeps the you know, Apple. You know damn well Apple 10 was not worth waiting in line for 4 or 5 or 10 hours and paying $1,200 to get when you had the Apple 9. It's stupid, but we keep on pursuing these material things and have become possessed by them. Whether those sisters and brothers that are living out away from the cities who don't have all of those things have come up focused on, when we talk about Kwanzaa and the 7 principles and all of these things of Kwanzaa. It's sometimes difficult when I talk to sisters and brothers from the continent. There's a sort of a leap, you know, why, if they haven't already studied, there's this, what is it? Why do y'all need that? Because they've come up with a sense of those things already in place. But we've had to actually break them down and say one by one, this is what we have to do, in order to have a productive life, a life that doesn't feed into our codependency. You know, the pursuit of the material on whatever level you're pursuing the material is the level that you are being drawn out of yourself, because the material is not self. Self is greater than the material. So, and that's not to say anything. We all do it to one degree or another. Psych has said as much when he's noted that, you know, especially sisters like to say, I'm not material. You material. You material like everybody else. You have to eat, you have to drink, you have to have a house, that sort of thing. But we have to understand that even getting the minimal, you know, having a very streamlined life, you're still having to come out of self to pursue those things, because those things are external to us. And so the more the bigger that list gets that we pursue, that we move after, that we put our all into possessing and to owning, the more we invest in that, the less we invest in self. And that's the same as I said earlier. The more we invest in the system of oppression, the less we invest in self, in our own communities. The more we invest in integrating and be a part of the society, the less we invest in our own Black communities. Again, you don't get to have it both ways. There's always a sacrifice. There's always a trade-off. It's just a matter of what you're willing to sacrifice. Do you want to sacrifice, you know, the material so that you can delve more into the self or the community, which is the same thing for us. Self is the community, and from an African centered perspective. Or do you want to invest more in self and give up some of what's in the community and do without those things, do without pursuing people on Instagram and their grandiose travels and whatnot. So it's still, it's a sacrifice as we, you know, and again, sacrifices are contextual like everything else. You know, what is sacrifice to one? What was it? 8-Ball MJG said, what is sacrifice to he who struggles is merely choice to he who is willing.
Yeah.
And that's a huge, I've carried that for years. And that's the huge difference. If you're not willing to do it, then yeah, it feels like sacrifice. But if you're willing to let those things go, then it's just, okay, I'm not gonna do it. And you don't feel that pain because you've embraced it and you've let it go and you're not attached to that shit anymore. We attach ourselves to these things and these things end up controlling, owning, manipulating us and getting us to do what it is they want to do. We are so heavily invested in this world that we can't even see it as it crumbles in real time. You know, if we look at the global scope of what's going on in the world, we're already involved in World War III. We just don't know it because ain't nobody on CNN or YouTube or Instagram came out and said, hey, y'all taking a selfie at ground zero. They bombing the shit. They finna drop another nuke. Peace out. Type of shit. If we saw some dumb motherfucker doing that shit, you know, on the front lines, we probably pay attention. But we don't realize World War III has actually factually already fucking started. So, so we sit back and continue to invest. Even Dr. King lamented to Harry Belafonte Jr. And I wish they had it on. It was recorded, but it was a conversation between Dr. King and Harry Belafonte where Dr. King lamented about the idea that he had worked so hard and got so many people to buy into this idea of integrating into a burning house. Even then, he understood, folks could see, Malcolm could see, all these cats could see that this country is on its last leg and on its way out, but we keep investing into it and buying into it and owning into it. And eventually the madness and the maelstrom that's going on out there is going to come home because the chickens always come home to roost. So you think gas is expensive now. Keep on investing in the system, in this world. And when you have to go to the grocery store with a backpack full of money just to go grocery shopping, like literally in 2019, Zimbabwe, their inflation was about 250%. Give you an idea, ours right now, what we're experiencing right now is about 8.5%. So 2019, 250% inflation. They came out with a $50 billion bill. 50 billion with a B, one bill, like a dollar bill. This one bill was worth $50 billion. You know what you could buy for it? Guess. Somebody take a guess. $50 billion bill. What can you buy with that?
A can of beans.
Can of bean? You could buy 2 loaves of bread with that shit.
Yeah.
At that point in time, 2 loaves of bread with a $50 billion bill. You know, it's madness. But we don't see ourselves connected to any of this. We don't see ourselves as having, even though we pay for gas just like everybody else. We pay for eggs like everybody else, you know. So but we're not attached consciously to what's going on in the world. We're simply attached unconsciously to powering it, to being the consumers that keep things going and keep things moving on a financial level and even on a physical. You know, go fight the wars. It's us that go and fight the wars, or you know, do the grunt work around the country or whatever. So it's still this idea of what it is we place value in, and we still collectively place value in our own individual egos, and we don't have any concept of anything bigger than what we are. You know, even in the 60s, what made Q and M so powerful was the fact, and it seems like, in a way, when I reflect, it seems like it must have been so easy then, just for the minimal things that we worked to do at some points, like the Feed the Children program. You know, that having a food giveaway or a community meeting where information was passed along, just those simple things. Because back in those days, the people had a concept of something bigger than themselves. The community was still intact. It had problems, it had tatters, it was, you know, slapped around and whatnot, but we still identified with one another. You still had attorneys living in the same neighborhood as mechanics. You know, we knew each other and we still had a sense of belonging to one another. And as the generations have gone on, we become more and more individuals, and we don't identify with one another to the point that, you know, we talk about genetics, you know, anything along those lines to where we are connected. Other than some superficial conversation, our people don't buy into that, unfortunately. That's all.
Go ahead, Syke. You got anything to add on that?
Well, I think he kind of waxed poetic about that. So there ain't really a lot more to add to that. Well, the only thing I'll say is, you asked the question about personal ownership against being misplaced for material ownership, and you know, from my point of view, I think that we definitely see a lot of that in this society, because this society is extremely materialistic, and a lot of times we identify, and I saw this in a lot of the brothers that we built with when we was incarcerated, brothers that went through the classes, went through the courses, and they get out here and they get in the same rat race that people out here are in, and they start mistaking the consciousness building. They mistake the consciousness building that we were doing in there. In my mind, the entire focus and the entire purpose of the consciousness building was to produce a better human being, was to evolve and elevate the human being himself. To them, though, for a lot of, not all, to them, the ultimate proof of that elevation is getting out here and getting material things. The best cars, clothes, shoes, money, jewelry. To them, the proof to your other brothers that your consciousness was working was getting out here, getting hold of this materialism. And when I saw that in a lot of these brothers, I'm like, they misunderstood the message. You know, I'm not saying, I personally don't believe there's nothing wrong with getting your war chest together, but making sure your finances right. I believe that's extremely important. There is no such thing as freedom or any kind of liberation without economic liberation. And so I don't see any problem with that. And even getting yourself some of the trinkets that you may feel like a reward for you being successful. I don't see a problem with that. But when you believe that that the elevation of your consciousness was to get these material trinkets, then what you have done is you freed yourself just to allow yourself to get back enslaved. There is no real freedom in it. You freed yourself, quote unquote, freed yourself just to get back enslaved. And that's all I have to say on that subject.
And real quick on that note you just ended on, that's kind of why I wanted to make sure that those that watch this video recognize the difference between dealing with internal wealth versus external possessions, or opposed to resources. And the reason why that's important is because a lot of times what people tend to do is they tend to build up their internal knowledge of something, like you said, for the sake of getting external trinkets, as opposed to building resources. Because when we talk about the collective body and collective empowerment, we're talking about us establishing resources for ourselves, which goes into the concept of self-sufficiency. If we're not working towards collective resource building, and all we're doing is purchasing things for the sake of possession, then that vibes right back into what we spoke on earlier, which goes into the mind frame of consumption, and keeping a people locked in and enslaved on consumption as opposed to production is the ultimate plan. And as long as they got us trapped like that, that goes into why we talking about the discipline necessary to deal with empowerment. And so from that standpoint, we find too many of our people living their lives just simply based on possession or possessing something, possessing external things. And so they're not actually evolving their mental state for the sake of empowering and recognize the strength and power of just being conscious in terms of knowing who you are, what you are, when you are, and where you are, which is why I use that front point of reference of time and space. So I appreciate y'all for that. The next thing here, and Psych, this is particularly for you, but E, feel free to jump in, is what does consequence mean in relation to our choices? And what is the significance of embracing progressive consequence?
Well, it's ironically you asked that because I was just talking to a brother about consequences today. Uh, I think that it's important for us to learn how to think. I was breaking down to the brother. I was telling him this. I'm gonna tell you the conversation. I was explaining to him about different ways of thinking and how I used to think back in the day when I was extremely emotional and how I think now. I told him whenever I think, whenever I think and whenever I consider taking on an action, I weigh the consequences. I weigh it. I weigh my rewards, and I weigh my rewards against my consequences. I'm gonna give you a good example, an example that I use. In prison, we used to throw raffles. So you might get you 10 packs of cookies, and you might make 100 square raffle. And you know the squares may cost a quarter a square. So so 100 squares at a quarter, what's that? $25. But the cookies themselves probably cost a quote what cookies at one time. Oh, I'm gonna say they cost $1. So you had a choice. You can invest a quarter to win $10 worth of cookies. Well, at a quarter a square, that's a good gamble. That's a good little gamble. And if you lose a quarter and don't win the cookies, so what? You can afford to lose a quarter. Let's say you buy 4 squares, or let's say you buy 8 squares. So you just spend $2 to take a chance of winning $10 worth of $10 value, which is cool because you can afford to lose $2. It's not going to end your life. Now we understand if we bought 8 squares, then we got an 8 out of 100 chance of winning. We got an 8 out of 100 chance of winning. Not great odds. Now you can improve your odds by buying 50 squares. You can go buy 50 squares. You buy 50 squares at a quarter. That's what, $12.50. That now it no longer makes any sense. It no longer makes sense. If you're gonna do that, you might well just go down to the commissary and buy you 10 packs of cookies. You understand what I'm saying? And I'm using that example to make this point that you have to really weigh your decisions, like especially when they count. You have to weigh them like you got to say, what are the worst that could happen? What's the best that could happen? And is this a good trade of value? Trading the best against the worst in this particular situation. Uh, in Texas, aggravated robbery, walking up to somebody, pulling the gun out, and taking their money with a weapon. That's called aggravated robbery. That case carries 5 to 99 to life. So if you decide that I'm going to make my living by robbing people, I want to get my money up. I want to make sure I got money in my pocket, and I'm gonna get that by robbing people. I walk up to E. It might take 10 minutes, less than that, to pull a gun out on E and take his money. He had $6,000 on him. I just got me $6,000 in 10 minutes. Woo! That's a lick. But that 10 minutes getting that 6,000 from E could cost me 5 to 99 to life. So now we got to ask ourselves if this is a good trade-off, if this is a good risk. To me, the risk is not worth the reward. I can earn $6,000. If I gotta lose 6 years, let's say I get 6 years, get sentenced to 6 years for the 6,000. That means I made $1,000 a year. I can beg for $1,000 and not have to spend no time behind bars. So in my thinking, it doesn't weigh out. It doesn't match up. And I use those examples because I believe that whenever we make decisions, whenever we're dealing with critical thinking, we have to always consider our consequences. When we don't consider our consequences, me, for a perfect example, when I got my time, it's because I committed an act without consideration of the consequences. If I'd have been in the thought process that I'm in now and considered the possible consequences, 9 times out of 10, I wouldn't have committed that act because it doesn't make sense to me to risk those consequences. Nowadays, I weigh things out. And if I committed an act, it's because I'm willing to deal with the consequences. And if the consequences are too much for me, if I feel like the consequences are not are too much in what they call a pyrrhic victory, if it's a pyrrhic victory to me, then I would not commit the activity. And a pyrrhic victory, to give a breakdown of it, if you ever seen the Book of Eli, the movie The Book of Eli with Denzel Washington, Denzel Washington came to that town and he had the book, the Bible. And the dude, I forget the dude name that ran the town, but he wanted the book because to him he could manipulate the people and have greater power of control if he had that book and utilize the words in that book basically to manipulate people into that spooky spirit of thinking. Well, anyway, he dedicated himself to getting that book from Eli. And in the process, he lost a lot of his soldiers. He got shot and wounded. At the end, he finally got the book. He had a victory. And he killed Eli. So he had a victory. He killed Eli, got the book, got back to his town, but the infection from his own gunshot was killing him. So he was dying. The people was rebelling in his town because he lost so many soldiers going after Eli. So basically, he had lost his complete power. So that was what's called a pyrrhic victory. He lost too much. The victory cost him too much. And that's my thinking when it comes to weighing out consequences, thinking of considering the consequences of our actions. You always have to ask yourself, what is this action going to cost me? You always have to ask, in my opinion.
Let me add a little more to that, because one of the things that I like to build on is the fact that, and it goes back to what you said earlier, how you don't use the word sacrifice and you use the word investment. Well, to me, when I think consequence, I think too many people look at consequences simply from the negative perspective, instead of recognizing, like I stated here in the question, is embracing progressive consequence. In other words, let's just take that same thing, going back to what you was talking about being in to where you had this specific group to where y'all trained so hard mentally and physically that it put y'all above everybody else. So when I think of the word consequence, it is the consequences of the hard training created a condition that allowed y'all to operate on a higher level. That was a consequence. The consequence of putting in that discipline, putting in that hard work, was something progressive. So too often, I think the people, when they think of the word consequence, they don't relate that to basically being what will happen as a result of something that you're doing now or not doing now. So consequence in itself is not a bad thing. Consequence is just basically reaping what you sow. And I think too often people don't look at the word for what it is. And that's why people find themselves trying to go on, like an example you gave earlier, trying to see if they can cut corners and achieve something or gain something without putting in the work. Is because they're not willing to embrace consequence. Because if we're willing to embrace consequence, then all of our actions will be from the position of being progressive, because we recognize that there's consequences for everything that you do or don't do. And so a consequence in itself is just basically going through the motions of basically investing in your future. And so I did want to make that point. E, did you got anything you wanted to add to that?
I think it's still a big, huge part of it is still value. We don't value. It's like, what is it? The wise man plants the seeds to trees he knows he'll never sit under the shade of, because he values what it is that tree is going to provide down the line. He's investing in what it is it's going to be someplace else. We only value those things that speak to our immediate condition and speak to our immediate, tactile senses. Those are the things that we value. Again, embracing their concept of death. And if you can put $100 toward taking a trip, or you can put $100 toward growing tomatoes. Most people will do the $100 toward the trip because they value going someplace or buying shoes or going to the club or whatever it is they're doing. But they don't value what it is to feed yourself. Again, going back to that codependency, we don't value doing for self. We don't value being able to go out and have a conversation, what it is we'll learn from, Psych, you experienced it when you was on vacation yourself, planting tomatoes and the light bulb that would go off when you had a conversation with another cat who was growing tomatoes and figuring some things out. And that energy, that high, that buzz from knowing, oh, okay, I can do this. I've learned, I've grown. We don't value even those things anymore because they don't speak to us getting mine. I got to get mine, you got to get yours. And that's the mentality. That's the, value system, is getting something material. And those are the things that we that if we had to do without, that's a sacrifice. Oh, I can do without a book. I can do without learning something. That ain't no sacrifice. I ain't want it no way. But if you take my, my club night away from me, now I'm giving up something to come to your class and learn something. I mean, how ridiculous that sounds. I know this gotta sound stupid to y'all. I'm gonna sacrifice going to the club tonight so I can go to a book study. That doesn't make any sense to me. I've been to the club enough to know exactly what's gonna happen at the club. But I may actually go to this book session, this study session, and learn something and grow. And I value that buzz that you get off of learning something, and that interaction on that level, that cerebral, making your brain stretch and move and all of that type of stuff. But we don't value that. We don't see that as anything worth having. So that's not the sacrifice. The sacrifice is not going to the club, because that's where the value is. Those shoes or that job or whatever it is, that's where the value is. And there's no value because we've embraced their concept of the I. We've embraced their concept of life and death. We've embraced their value system. So until we stop distracting ourselves with their value system, even our jobs are distractions. Everything is a fucking distraction. And until we start to, on an individual level, since that's where we're at, and begin to make these individual choices to not invest in the bullshit, but in investing in something that's internal, something that we can't see, but we can damn sure feel it, then, we're going to keep spinning our tires and wasting time. Such that it is.
Thanks, Brother E. Let me go to this next one here. And the reason why I want to talk about this one is it kind of goes into the essence of why we having this discussion, and getting people that are listening to this to basically go into a position of self-reflection, because not enough of our people are looking at themselves for what they are, going into the time-space thing. So in that context, the recognition of where we are, whether it be environmentally, emotionally, or psychologically, what keeps a person in bondage to blame and fault?
I personally believe it's in all truth, whenever I see that in a person, I see personal weakness. That's what I see. I see personal psychological weakness in people that constantly want to blame other people and other situations, or fault other things other than themselves for whatever condition or situation they find themselves in. Usually when you find a person like that, you'll find somebody that cannot grow. They can't grow, they can't develop, they can't free themselves from the situation that they find themselves in. So I see that as a personal weakness. That's what I see it as. People that's always them, him, her. People that's always make, I've dealt with people like this. And when you're trying to sit with them and explain to them where their thinking is incorrect and how they could change that thinking in order to get better results out of life, you can't reach it, because they would rather it be the world's fault. It's the world has to be wrong, instead of it just simply being that they are dealing with the world incorrectly. They are dealing with people in their relationships incorrectly. So I personally see it personal weakness as a personal psychological weakness that changes a person to that way of thinking, that blame and fault way of thinking.
I think that blame and fault, if for no other reason, because we've been here for so long dealing with their religious bullshit. Christianity is based on blame and fault, as opposed to accountability and I don't know, resolution of issues and whatnot. So there's this constant need to feed the ego by avoiding the pain of taking on the responsibility of anything, and looking for blame so that we feel better because we have someone to blame. We have someone to point a finger at. We have someone to get away from whatever our responsibility in the situation is. We're able to put it off on someone else and avoid that pain, avoid that fear. But it's much easier and less productive than taking it on for oneself again, because that seems like a real simple question. Why do people blame and what was the other one? Blame, fault, and blame. If someone came up and asked me that, my response would be, well, why do you do it? I make a concerted effort not to do it. I blame me for whatever. If I have an issue with somebody, okay, blame me. I'm at fault. I fucked up. How can we fix this and make it so that it doesn't happen again? But most people are so tied into that fault and blame that's where we stop. We just want to feel that rush of having somewhere to put blame and fault and judgment. We're so heavy into judgment. Everything we do is judge. And again, we bought into their system. For us, justice has nothing to do with judgment. It has to do with consequence. It has to do with the results of your actions. But in this system, from religion to the court system to everything, is based on judging, on being judged, on judging somebody else, because it's a godlike power. I get to judge you and place blame on you, and now I'm empowered and I feel better.
One of the things that I've also adapted, and I know realistically, there are things that are both sometimes out of your control. Matter of fact, I adapted it from George Jackson's book. I adapted it from George Jackson. George Jackson, he said, and I think it was "Blood in My Eye," and I can't remember the exact quote, but it is something that I took and I adapted it to my life. He said that most problems in your life, you could basically trace back to you. There are small little things that, that's outside of your control, and, somebody else might have did it, but a lot of times those things themselves are irrelevant. At the end of the day, it's all on you. And, that's the mindset that I accept. Anything that's happening in my life that I don't like, it's on me. And by me putting it on me, then I have the power to change it and fix it. I always have. And if anybody try to convince me that it's somebody else's fault, I ain't trying to hear it. Because if I accept mentally that it's on somebody else, then I have to wait for them to decide to take that oppression or whatever it is off of me. And I'm not willing to let nobody else have that type of power. It's on me. It's something that I did or some mistake that I made, and therefore I can make a course correct. I can correct what I've done in order to change where I'm going and what I'm going to get out of life. So at the end of the day, to me, it's all on me. And I think that that is an extremely productive way to look at things. I definitely don't believe that fault and blaming others is going to help. It's going to benefit. And let me say this, and this is off the subject. That I'm a single man that lives alone, and I just made some of the best candied yams ever. I just had to go in there, and I had them in there slow. It was in there slow. I was letting them caramelize. I was letting them candy yams are magnificent. These boys are great. I think the only way they could be better if I had some marshmallows to go on top of them. But anyway, let's get back.
But you still can't grow an aloe vera plant, a cactus.
Well, I have a horticulture certificate that says that I'm great at growing stuff.
It's like I'm not going to go into why I'm going to say this, but this is an inside joke between me and E. When them yams make you want to taste the taste of your tongue, that's when you know you done made some damn good yams.
Okay.
But based off what you were just saying in regards to placing blame, that really goes into the essence of why I felt it was important that us three speak on the Warriors' discipline of Black August, because you actually went exactly where we needed to go with that, and that's referring it and tying it right back to George Jackson, Blood in My Eye. Because the thing about it is, and that's why I opened up on that question in regards to self-reflection, so many people are not self-reflecting properly, or they really don't understand what self-reflection means. Therefore, the only recourse they have is going back to the victim codependency, and that's blaming and fault and finding fault. So it all goes right back to you. We have to accept accountability for our own actions, and we have to recognize that consequence in itself should be and can be a actually powerful thing, which is why we refer to it as embracing progressive consequence. And that just basically means investing in your future from that standpoint. One of two more questions, y'all, and then we're gonna close out here. What are some sources of inspiration in order to pull out of self-inflicted condemnation? Either one of y'all.
Yeah. I have no idea.
You say, what are sources of inspiration in order to pull out of self-inflicted condemnation?
Yep.
Explain that. Break that down for us.
Self-inflicted condemnation. And the reason why I came back with this one is because when a person is held in the bondage of blame and fault, now, and then you take that into how we started with a victim codependent. This is basically someone who viewed their life as just things are just always going wrong. I'm a failure at this. I can't get this right. They constantly condemning themselves and not recognizing that what they're doing is they're spell casting their own their own life to the point to where they're projecting and promoting to their future self that I'm a failure and I'm going to always be a failure. So when we talk about self-inflicted condemnation, what can we do, or what kind of sources of inspiration can we offer to pull someone up out of that mentality, out of that thinking?
You can't.
Yeah, I honestly can't come up with an answer because I don't understand it. And this is what I mean. I don't understand the thinking. I don't understand it. I would say, some of the basic things we would say, one thing I would say that a person has to start giving themselves a different mental diet. And I think that would come from reading and studying different types of people, even listening to certain type of music. It's certain music that I don't care. You said, Brother Roy, you love to say that I love to listen to unconscious music. And I may listen to a little unconscious music, but it's certain things I would not listen to that woe is me, miserable music. I ain't got no friends. I don't trust nobody. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that depressing. No. It's rap that's like that.
Okay.
There are rap, that, and I hate to name some of these brothers because they're not bad music. They're not bad artists. It's just that the music they make talks to the brother who's in the hood, broke, poor, and just got crossed. You know what I'm saying? They talk. Matter of fact, I use a Pac. I love Pac. I believe he's the greatest of all time. But he's shed so many tears, so much pain. That mentality. And at one time, I would jam this consistently. Now I jam. Now the stuff that I'm jamming, even when it's unconscious, it's coming from a higher perspective. The rapper is talking about I'm winning. Or matter of fact, a good one to give an example of what I like to hear is Slim Thug's "I'm a King." He got a song called "I'm a King." I love music like that. Or Yo God is recession proof. I love music like that. That music speaks to Jay-Z and Nas got a song called Success. That is where my mind is tuning on. So I think you got to start feeding your mind a different diet. And I'm gonna read some George Jackson from Solid Ed Brother. I was looking for that quote and I can't find it, but I found this one. And I used to know this verbatim, and I used to make the brothers learn this. But he says, George Jackson said, Solid Ed Brother, page 155, he says, what if a person was so oriented that the loss of no material thing could cause him mental disorganization? This is the free agent. He is nameless, faceless, emotionless, loveless. He is without habit, without weakness of the flesh. He travels light, and only in the company of those who, like himself, prize self-determination over baseball and beer. Only the free agent can win for us the necessary control of over the direction of our unrewarding life. And that was a state of mind that I was really trying to get into. the free agent. And like I used to tell him, uh, 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 he said the free agent values self-determination over baseball and barrel. It doesn't mean that you can't have a barrel, and it doesn't mean that you can't watch a game. He said that you value self-determination over baseball and barrel, over those frivolous things that in the end of the day really is not going to bring uh, uh, intrinsic value to your life, really. So to me, it starts with a person giving themselves a different mental diet. I truly believe that positive education always corrects error. I truly believe that. So I believe that it starts with a different mental diet. You have to start watching the people that you spend time with, the conversations that you listen to, the music you listen to, what you're watching, all that old drama field, BS TV that people love to watch. Hear that and start really diving into and bathing yourself and a more positive, elevating type of mental diet. I truly believe that that's where you start. That's where it has to start. And those things will start changing how you think and how you view reality. And especially if you're around other brothers and sisters that vibrate on a different level, you can't be with low vibrational people. You can't. You can't be in a relationship with a low vibrational person, and you can't kick it with low vibrational people, and you can't have those low vibrational conversations. Because all that's gonna do is reinforce that dead mentality.
Thank you
That's
for
why I
that.
say you can't do nothing to get somebody to do it. It's something. What is it? Morpheus told Neo, you got to see it for yourself. Until you see it. So I guess the most that we can do, or a person wanting to do, is to be it. So that when they encounter somebody, that somebody may well see it. That's all you can do. Because until they decide to change the people around them, they're not going to, all we doing is they're not even watching this channel because they too busy looking at traveling channels on YouTube and all the rest of that bullshit.
Or cat videos.
Yeah, you can't get them to do anything outside of living the life, being that change you wish to see in the world.
So in essence, when it boils down to it, as people have to be a person has to be able to overcome their fear of self-reflecting, because self-reflection will cause them to be critical of their lifestyle, critical of their life. Look at their life and look at what they've accomplished or became of themselves, and what value will that have for the empowerment of my people in the community.
And that's the thing. The first emotion that we experience in life is fear. And so we're constantly doing something to get away from fear. And so we get to a point where we start attaching this word love to anything that causes us to forget that fear. Anything that causes us to some type of distraction or some type of peace and calm from that fear, whatever that fear looks like. Fear comes across as anger and depression and sadness, but it all boils down to fear most times of losing something. And so we've generationally bought into, again, European mindset, this fear. And we dwell on fear constantly, all day, every day. Most everything we do is an attempt to get away from that fear. And until we embrace that fear and look at that fear and do the most fearful thing, which is that self-reflection, which brings all of that fear back to the surface and conscious and makes you have to deal with it. People are not going to go in any other direction. We're going to continue to buy into getting away from the fear. And again, that's something that a person has to do. A person has to reflect and embrace their own fear. I had to embrace mine. Y'all have had to embrace yours, and it's a continuing process.
Right. So it's a journey. Last question here. And I'm not necessarily speaking to us, but it has to with, and it seems simple, like the last one started out, but this is really what people need to hear. At the end of the day, based on recognizing what we talk about when we get into the warrior discipline of Black August, is what can a person gain through living a progressively disciplined lifestyle? What am I going to gain? I say that because value.
Everything that you lost living a progressively material lifestyle is what you have to gain. Yourself, your concept of reality, your concept of time and space and life and death and God, everything that will actually empower a person to the point that they don't feel like, oh, I hate to go to this job. Oh man, I need to get high so I can forget this shit. I need to go drink some beer or watch, 30 hours of a football game, a baseball game, or porn or whatever it is in order to get away from it. We'll actually be able to deal with the reality that's given to us. What is it? You said something that kind of keyed in a little bit. I was going to jump in and put it on you a while ago. It's like, well, not put it on you, but pull it out at that point. But the idea, is it the law of Osar? Everything that comes into my life comes into my life for the betterment of my life. So there is nothing negative, which is what this phrase, it's all good, actually means, is that everything that we come across, perceived sacrifice or an investment or whatever it is, actually factually builds us when we get to a point of realizing our own cultural position in this world. We become empowered to the point, what Malcolm said, we don't feel that stick no more. Or what Morpheus said, when you're ready, you won't have to dodge bullets. You just stand there and watch the shit go through you. Oh, that's nice, and go on about your business. These are the things that we have to gain. Actual fucking power. Any job that you have, any position, you're CEO, whether you're a billionaire or whatever it is, all of that shit can be taken away from you. All of it. But them little rice farmers, them little brothers and sisters that live away on the continent, live away from the metropolis and live in the, back up in the bush and whatnot, who eat every day, who have their families intact, but don't have iPhones, don't have fancy shoes, don't have all of that. They have a sense of reality and purpose and their place in the universe. They have an understanding of the things that are actually important, and can't nobody in the world take that from them. It took 400 years for them to take it from us who are in this country. It took 400 years for them to get us to the point where we can't even conceive of these things being important. But no one can take it from those individuals that stand in on the continent today, again, away from the cities, those sisters and brothers who have this value system that's been placed upon them that puts them at the center of the universe. And a lot of people would take that to be very arrogant, but that would be the ego. That would be the European concept of what I said, or the European interpretation of what I said. But when you're placed at the center of the universe, that means that you're responsible for the universe. So it's a blessing and it's a curse all at the same time. But these are the things that we have to find. You want to end police brutality? Learn this shit. Sit down. Stop doing the same things over and over and figure out why it is they don't work for us. You want to end hunger amongst children? You sit down and learn about it. These are the things, you want less gun violence, you want climate change, whatever it is. There was no climate change issue for all of human history until we got to these folks and this lifestyle. So you want to end these things and change the world. This is how you change the world. You don't go out and try to change the world out there. You change the world in your own self, because that's the only concept of world that you have. That's the only effect that you can have. You lose control beyond your fingertips. You can't control anything outside of your fingertips. You can't define any word beyond the tip of your tongue. None of it. You have no control. Once a word leaves your mouth, that's it. It's in the atmosphere. Other people are going to translate it however they want to translate it, interpret it. They can get happy, they can get pissed, whatever it is. But you can only control up to the tip of your tongue. You can only control to your fingertips. Once it's beyond that, it's out of your control. And so again, we bought into what it is they've been selling us, hook, line, and sinker. And until we get back to that, hang it up. That's what we have to gain.
Well, I'm gonna add on by saying this. I think that he's absolutely right. I think that we have to gain self-mastery, by living a disciplined lifestyle. But that's what discipline does. It gives you mastery over self. It gives you self-control. Brother E was just saying, I think I read it in the Tao Wu by RZA. I think that's where it was. where he said it's all good. If you look in the beginning of scripture, every time God declared something, he declared it good. He declared nothing bad. So it's all good. And that's one of the mind states that I developed while I was incarcerated, that everything that's happening in your life is good. It's either good right now or it's taking you through what you need to experience in order to learn how to develop good for yourself. But at the end of the day, it's all good. And you know, me, I'm gonna get a tad bit spiritual here. See, I truly believe that all people on the planet have the same purpose, you have an individual purpose, but we have a group purpose. And the individual purpose is whatever it is. War's individual purpose may be to help the Panther chapters grow and to usher brothers and sisters into the next stage of Panther ideology development. That might be his individual purpose. But at the end of the day, our true purpose is to manifest God in our own character. That's what I truly believe. That all human beings are made in the image of the creative energy of the universe. And because of that, the goal is to start back recognizing what that truly means, what that looks like, what that sounds like. And that's where the discipline comes in, because when we learn to discipline the animal part of ourselves, then we learn how to elevate and manifest the more spiritual parts of ourselves, the more deeply conscious parts of ourselves. And so that's what you have to gain. You have to gain self-mastery. You have to gain self-control. And that's not about controlling anything else. It's not about controlling the next person. It's not about controlling anything other than self. But once you learn how to control self, then you'll find that you don't need to control anything. And that's what I believe you have to gain.